It's also pathetic, this conservative idea that homeless people only matter if they're veterans and they only matter for the purpose of sensationalizing them. We don't want to actually reform the VA. We don't want to reform, programs to provide assistance to veterans. We don't want to provide housing to veterans. We don't want to do anything for them once
we don't want to stop sending them to die in stupid wars for oil.
And just to the point you made about how some migrants are veterans, there is a not insignificant amount of undocumented immigrants who served in the United States military, and following the completion of their contract were deported out of this country. They served this country just to be kicked out of it. So these are, to pit these groups against each other when they're not mutually exclusive, and the struggle we can fight equally for it. It's just gross. It's so gross for them to even just pretend after, however long they've spent demonizing homelessness, to pretend now they care.
And you know what else bothers me? Just the last thing I'll say is I hate that there's no countervailing force to the rights lies. Meaning, why don't we have a news outlet that can actually put these unhoused folks on air? Let's talk to them. Let's talk to veterans. Let's talk to migrants. Let's humanize the story that you just mentioned of people being deported. Yes, it's okay, occasionally an NPR story will creep in there, or if you're lucky, but no one is humanizing folks. We just see them through the lenses of whether they're convenient or inconvenient for our political aims.
Right. There was just a video that went viral of some citizen journalists talking to a homeless woman who was describing her experiences of getting raped while being homeless, and how it was happening almost every night, and just the distress she's going through, and the illnesses that she had. And I think those things do a lot to humanize unhoused people, so much more than maybe just reading something on the internet or looking at statistics. And it sucks that people can't just have empathy, but sometimes they need to put a face to that struggle to want to get involved and to want to care about it. And I think you're right. There needs to be something on the left that does that, because right now I don't know. I don't know what there is.
Yeah.
Any last thoughts on this?
No, are we squeezing another story, or can I vamp?
You can vamp away.
Hell yeah. Look, I think this is a perfect example of the way that tools for political aim are not clear cut, and that we need to stop playing into the idea that the working class is one thing, i.e. all white. The veterans are one thing, i.e. all white. Migrants are another thing, all brown. And oh yeah, what about the Ukrainian migrants who are seeking refuge? Well, they're okay. That actually the walls between our different struggles are incredibly thin and overlapping. And dare I say, we need to remember intersectionality. I can't say that if I were sitting in Florida right now, but luckily I'm not. And again, we're having a labor resurgence right now. And I think something the labor movement has learned, and I hope continues to learn and remember, is that, that our movements are only as strong as we actually stop pitting workers of different backgrounds against one another. And so I feel like we're in a time where we have to actually all pull in the same direction, is I guess what I mean. This is my grandiose sort of outro. You like this, Ray?
I do, and I actually want to just add to that, because I think you made a good point about the resurgence in labor. And we did get to see a very wide variety of industries where we can realize that, the working class does have a similar struggle. We saw, the coal miners striking, and then we saw factory workers who make packaged food products striking, Amazon workers striking. We also saw Starbucks workers striking, who the right wing would have you believe are bourgeois, upper echelon. The person making your coffee at Starbucks somehow is not working class when they absolutely are. But also the writers' strike, right? Yes. These are all people who are just fighting for the same, of course, the terms that they're fighting for specifically all differ, but really what they're fighting for is decency in their jobs, right? To work with dignity, to be compensated fairly, and to have protections, safety, or just protections that they're not going to get fired, right? So
yeah, and what's so messed is that every time we hear of someone. We hear about someone who is marginalized, like Jordan Neely, for example, who I know we're gonna talk about later. It's always when they were murdered by like either a police officer or a former police officer or military dude, in a subway station. It's like, no, these are the voices we should have been hearing beforehand. And so again, like, and to your point about like, the working class struggle, also, let's remember that the majority of working class people are women and women of color and are also mothers, right? So all of this is coming to a head. When we fight for abortion rights, we're actually fighting for working class women's rights and labor rights as well. So yeah, and the right they think they can pit people against one another and they can't. And so if the mainstream news is not gonna do it, we have to.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.